Couple of agreements. Couple of agreements I like to talk about at first. Small steps. You all have you have full plates, and I know that this can seem like one more thing. And so we're here really to talk about what is this strategy? What is this process? What might it look like in your spaces? So we're going to be high level. I'm going to give you lots of stories. I'm not going to give you projects to do because the purpose of service learning is really to encourage young people to say, oh, I really care about that. I'm really concerned about this. How can we come together and look at ways that we might be able to solve this? That leads to things like youth leadership and youth voice, but it also leads to some of those relationship building skills. It leads to critical thinking. It leads to communication. More about that later. So know that small steps are really important, and that's how you start something that'll last. The next one, engage in discussions. I know y'all do a lot of talking, so it's gonna be a continuation of the work we did before with our youth voice and the journey maps. And then the last square is really about what's learned here leaves here. How else can you share this information? How can you take bits and pieces from our conversation today and ongoing, and weave it into what you're already doing? And I'm hoping that let's look for some of those intersections rather than one more thing. You know how that gets. But how do you weave something like this into what you're already doing so it's a value added rather than an add-on? I know you're liking that already, not one more thing. There were supposed to be 4 sessions, but there's really 3. One is extra long today. We will take a break a little bit into this session, but really today what we're going to be talking about is the what, the why, and the how of service learning. And on April 15, we'll be doing a check-in. So that'll be a chance for us to talk about what have you thought about, what have you tried, what are you wondering about? And then that last session is about how do we demonstrate, how do we share with other people, sort of like what we did with the youth voice journey maps. How do we share what we've learned and what we've done during this segment with other people? So it's one of those ways to what is learned here leaves here. Questions about this? Bridget, is there anything else that you would like to frame in that conversation about that last one? What your thinking is about? We haven't set a date for that, but anything else that you would like to add for that?
Sure. So in relation to Showtime for session 4, it'll be a similar format to the great panel discussion that we had last June. So it's an opportunity to come together and share what your agency has done specifically as it relates to what you'll learn here about service learning. And we'll open it up to the network as a time for engaging them on this topic, question and answers to learn from the experts, which you'll soon become. We will get a date on the book, so here shortly we'll likely send out a doodle poll to make sure that that date is one that everyone is available that's on this call, or who needs to be on the call rather.
Mm-hmm. It's a way of demonstrating. You'll learn a little bit about the service learning process. One of the final part of a service learning process is to demonstrate. What did you do? How'd you learn? Or what are your plans? Everyone is different. So we'll have to create that together and see what that looks like. All right. So today, really a background in service learning and the role of youth voice and youth empowerment, and an overview of some kind of plug and play resources that NYLC has. I may have shared those with you before, but it wasn't in the same context. But there are some lesson plans, kind of a curriculum that one could use. And I'm curious because you guys are working with bigs and littles and program design. After we go through this, I'll be interested to learn from you how you see this aligning in your agency. So that's our plan today. What I want to do first, I want to send us into some breakout rooms and have some quick conversation because that's really also important in this space. So the questions, you probably know each other, but if there's somebody new to the group, share a little bit about who you are, talk about what your experience with community service or service learning is, and either in your capacity at big brothers big sisters or in your life outside of work, because I know you all have life outside. I hope you all have life outside of work, because we're talking about mental wellness and mental well-being, so you need to have, so talk a little bit about that. You could talk about your roots, but then also think about sharing in this small group. You'll be in groups of 2 or 3. What are you thinking about how you might be able to use service learning in your agency? So we'll just go in a room for about 5 minutes, just enough to say hello. So I'm not talking at you. I'm trying not to just talk right at you. Any questions? All right, friends, here we go. Start with definitions. When I do this, my little song and dance on community service and service learning, I start with definitions because I think that's really important. I talk about community service as an activity that engages people in addressing needs of their schools and their community. Really good and important work. Both community service and service learning have the word service in them. We're going to do just another, I'm all full of activities today, guys. If you could open up another window on your browser and go to slido.com and type in that number, it'll allow you to type in, I'd like you to answer this question. What are words or phrases that describe service? What are words or short phrases that describe service? So go to slido.com and type in 9585479, or you can use the QR code on your phone and it'll take you to that site as well. But what are words or phrases that describe or depict service? Are you finding that? Oh, okay, good. We've got a couple of people. Helping others, giving back. Absolutely. Volunteering. Absolutely. Community. Yeah. Connection. Oh, these are good, guys. And feel free, if you want to use the same word, that's okay. Just you can add as many words as you'd like. Community improvement. Absolutely. Service has to do with making the community a better place. Support, helping others. Yeah. Servant leadership. Yeah. So I'm seeing lots of intersecting, making the world a better place, being of service. If you ever want to read something a little bit deeper on this, we can't get to everything in my toolbox, but there's an article called helping, fixing, and serving, and it talks a little bit about the difference between helping and fixing and being of service, because you start from a different place. All right, now same platform, same link and everything. Now write down words or phrases that describe learning. So we talked about service. Now let's talk about learning. What are some words that describe learning? Sometimes this is a harder one. Curiosity. Knowledge. Advocacy. Awareness, understanding, knowledge. Yes. Exploration. We got some inquiry specialists here. Perspective. Oh man, bam, bam, bam. Skill. Yep. Understanding. Exploration. Mhm. Just a couple more seconds and experiencing. Oh, yeah. I'm going to take a picture of this one because this is really a great slide because it shows how do you meld those two together? Wondering, yes. Inquiry and investigation, that is one of the most important parts about a service learning experience. You don't start with a project, you start with an issue, and we'll get into that a little bit. I'm going to move forward here, but thank you for this because I can see some of the intersections of service and of learning. And I think community service, good and important work, but sometimes you're not connecting to knowledge. Sometimes you're not connecting to exploration. Sometimes it's an action. And I think that's good and important work. I will always say that. But when we talk about service learning, we're really looking at a process. It is a process where young people use academic and civic knowledge and skills, or they are growing academic and or civic knowledge and skills to address genuine community needs. So it's really an opportunity for young people to say, oh, I'm really wondering about this. I really think that the park, it needs some cleaning up, and that's very different than showing up at the park and the adults saying, okay, let's clean up the park. We'll get into a little bit more of that. But again, it's a process for young people. And this is real nerdy, so I'm not going to go too far into this, but I want you to see that there is this process where you're really starting with what is it that you want young people to be able to know, do, or understand. So do you want them to have this service learning experience connected to academics, or to practice their math, or to learn about science? Or do you want this experience to be about growing leadership, or to grow how to work together in a team, or how to advocate for themselves? So really thinking about what it is that those outcomes are for young people, because it's not just about checking off a box. I've done 40 hours, good and important work, and there will always be those spaces where young people will need to have some hours for graduation requirement, or sometimes schools or districts have other opportunities to use service hours. But we're really talking about what's in it for the young people. How do we grow skills? And I think BBBS is about outcomes for young people. It is about supporting them to become the people that they can be, the adults, and building those skills. So I just add that as an important front loading. You can see that after the first stage, how do you know that you've reached those outcomes? That third stage is where we're going to spend a little bit more time digging into, because that's where you design the student learning experience. We call it the IPARD process. And then that last stage, like anything that you do, is self-assessment. What went well? What didn't go well? What do we need to change? How do we make it better? And some of the resources I will share with you, there is some documents. There's a planner, a unit planner, or an activity planner that you can use to go through this. But today is really high level. It's about understanding what this process is all about. And that's why I'm going to focus mostly, and I'm going to be talking at you a lot for a big chunk of time. And I'm sorry about that. I don't know how else to get through some of this information. We call this the IPARD process. It stands for investigation, planning and preparing, action, reflection, demonstration. What do you notice about this image? What do you notice about it? It's a circle. Yeah, it is a cycle. Yeah. And I think oftentimes when you finish a circle, you can start over again because you haven't really solved the underlying cause, or you've with no end. Yes. Sometimes there's other things that you find out, that the young people find out, that they still need to address. Pre and post are longer. Maggie, ding, ding, ding. Look at that action segment. It's 1/5 of the pie of the cycle. And oftentimes we, in some kind of a service experience, our focus is a lot on that action. Action is an important part. I'm not saying it's not. It is really important. But the pre-service and the post-service, there's more time. That's where those opportunities for leadership development and critical thinking and 21st century skill building and life skills and social emotional learning, that's where that takes place. I think this cycle is also a good transferable skill when young people, oftentimes, when we talk about, well, this is a problem, we jump to trying to solve it. And with young people, sometimes we jump to solve it because we maybe have some experience and we're not letting them have that opportunity to kind of wrestle, as my dad used to say, to wrestle with some of those issues. Investigation, that's where we start with young people, really asking them, what is it that you care about? A great strategy to do this is to do what we call a walkabout, where you go into the community and you identify assets and challenges. Now, this community could be a classroom, it could be a school. I'm trying to think about contexts in at BBBS, what context that could be. It could be if you're doing, I know that there are some spaces where you don't have enough bigs, and so you have a big and multiple littles. This is a space I could envision doing some kind of service learning. So maybe it's, let's use that as an example. Maybe the littles say, you know, there's not enough bigs. Okay, that's a problem. So how do we find out more about it? So you investigate, you ask them to talk to other people, to do surveys, to interview, to observe. You figure out ways to help them investigate the problem, because that's what should lead to deciding on what the project is. So in that investigation is where you decide where the project is, what the action is. After one decides, okay, so let's take that same example. The young people want to find more bigs, and so they've interviewed bigs, they've interviewed littles, they've interviewed the people at the admin at BBBS. I'm really going on. I've not thought this out, guys. So they've interviewed parents, they've interviewed schools, they've interviewed alumni, they've interviewed the people who have been, so you get the idea. So they've interviewed and they've surveyed, and they come up with one of the problems they are seeing is that the pockets of potential volunteers, they're not targeting a pocket of young professionals. Okay, I'm making this up, guys. I'm really making it. So there's a group that they know in their community called the Young Professionals Association. And they realize that in their research, they've come up with this group, and they think that that's a place that they can go and do some recruiting. So they decide that what they need to do is create flyers. They need to create an informational interview or a video. They make an appointment with the head of the Young Professionals organization. And so that's where they do all their planning. Their action, delivering brochures, writing an article in the local newspaper, that action then takes place after they've done the investigating and planning. The reflection is really important, because we know that links to some of those learning outcomes, self-awareness, understanding process, taking data and making sense of it, understanding your impact. So that reflection happening before, during, and after is really critical. Demonstration, the last section or the last part of the IPARD process, is when, after you've done your action, you share the results in some way, shape, or form. That could be at a BBBS, uh, Big Brothers Big Sisters staff meeting or board meeting, or it could be somehow sharing what they did and the outcomes with a group that needs to know about it. Okay, I'm going to stop for a moment and kind of catch my breath, see if you have thoughts and ideas. What strikes you about this right now that might be different than what you thought of in terms of service learning?
Yeah, I think for me, it breaks it down to much more measurable. You can, put some ideas and thoughts together, and you kind of have a step-by-step process to kind of filter through. I think it makes it a little bit easier to manage and kind of reflect on, and gives you a little bit more direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think having a process is really important. Is really important.
One thing
Anything.
that, oh,
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead. I'm
Julie.
sorry. No,
One
go
thing
ahead,
that's
Maggie.
standing out to me is all of the like the very intentional time spent. I think sometimes with a small team, we're kind of like just focusing on the action piece and then moving
Mhm.
on to the next thing. So being able to see visually that it will take so much preparation and like post action time is really interesting to see that that's like really where the important things happen. It's a good reminder to myself to not like just bulldoze ahead and check it off.
Mhm. Mhm. And I also encourage small steps. So I talk a lot about kind of best practices. This is a research-based, brain-based strategy. And so we all sometimes you get faced with that rubric is how 1 to 4. When we're starting off, we're not always going to be at that oh, we got this down. So taking steps in those directions. Sometimes people start with a project that they already have or have been doing forever. And I don't know what your experience in each of your agencies is with doing any kind of service, but I'll use an example of a food drive. A lot of nonprofits do food drives, good and important work. They'll ask the young people to spread the word about getting cans and non-perishables from home, and how if one class or one group gets more, they get a pizza party or whatever. But they launch the project. Some people who have started with a project like that will maybe weave in, okay, what do you think the agency, the food shelf, what do you think they need? Maybe we should ask them what they need. What kind of skills is that building for the young people when they are being encouraged to find out more? What skills are they building?
I think communication skills, thinking kind of outside the box, knowing that they need to reach out to community resources and versus just guessing or assuming what they need, kind of gives them some
Mm-hmm.
thought about, let us not just assume this is what they need,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we do with
Absolutely.
youth all the time too, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And I think about the communication skill of actually talking to somebody either on a phone or in person. I know that I err on the side of sending an email or a text as well. And sometimes you can get so much more done by just having a conversation. But those are skills that young people don't always have. They don't have those skills. And so when I have worked with young people who are doing any kind of phone conversation, we write a script. We write a script so they have that confidence. And that's a skill. Think about how that transfers. What a great, important skill. Anything else that you're thinking of that it might, any other kind of skill that young people might be developing at that point?
think accountability, just knowing to
Mhm.
follow through, reporting back to the team. I think that's what
Mhm.
comes to mind.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because in a service learning process, you are building or giving young people the experience to practice those skills. Because we might be talking, and this is why I was really surprised 10 years ago when I had the term leadership on my title, the director of learning and leadership, because I thought, oh, leadership, that's about those people who are just saying, get her done, bulldoze forward. And that's not how I am in a working group. But I realized that for young people, we can teach them this is what a leader does. This is what a leader can be thinking, or these are the skills that make but they need to practice. They need to practice. And I think actually in a service learning process, they are practicing those leadership skills. Communication is a leadership skill. Understanding and empathy and curiosity and investigating, those are leadership skills. Working as a team member, those are leadership skills. So in a way, having them go through this service learning process really gets to some of those leadership skills that we want to see in the young people that you are working with. Am I right? Does that make sense? All right. All right. I've already talked way too much, but I do want to draw out some of the different kinds of action, because sometimes we think of action as just being helping poor people. And I might, I don't know the specifics of the population that you're working with. Some young people may come from abundance. Some young people may come from limited resources. But I like to think of taking action doesn't have to be about just serving people who are hungry or people who are homeless. And so I differentiate between the kinds of action that you can take. Creating awareness is really an important type of service learning. Let me give you an example. There was a school that I was working at, and the group of fifth graders were partnering with another school, and they were labeling, it was connected to their science standards on human impact on the environment. They were fifth graders. That was a heady standard, but the goal was to connect it to their water unit. And so they had done some research together with this other school, and they had people come and talk about the watershed. And then they went out and labeled storm sewers, the catch basins where the extra water goes down into the sewer system. But they also decided that they were going to educate the community around those catch basins about what they did and how the community could continue to help have cleaner water. So they made little door hangers for little pieces of paper that would go on a doorknob to educate the community about the kinds of issues around water quality. So that was creating awareness. That is a service learning experience. When you create some kind of awareness, maybe holding an event that has to do with mental health, because I know that your focus for this is mental wellness and youth safety and well-being. So think about what are some of the ways they could create awareness. The next one is some kind of direct or indirect service. Direct service is when you're actually working with somebody who is receiving your service. Like if you're at a homeless shelter, although many young people are not going to be working in a homeless shelter, if they're high schooler, maybe, but maybe a food drive or some kind of space where you have direct contact. A good example is working with our seniors in a senior center. Indirect is also a type of service. So you might be writing letters to children who have life-threatening diseases. There really is an organization that does that, and that's an easy service learning experience as long as you do something before, during, and after, and not just the activity. So service. The next kind of action you can take is is advocacy. how young people, I've worked with some young people that have gone to city councils and have gone to their mayors and they've gone to legislators and they are trying to change a system. Sometimes it's hard for littles, but I've seen seventh graders go to city council members in their ties, and they had done all this research on what they wanted. They wanted new construction to have 10% permeable surfaces, which in seventh grade, guys, I didn't know what permeable surfaces were. So yeah, the kids these days. They went and presented and advocated to change some kind of a law. I thought that was really, really cool on their part. That last one, philanthropy. Sometimes, although that's not where I usually start, especially working in some of these spaces where there aren't a lot of resources, but sometimes that's what needs to change. That's what is needed to create that change, is raising money. So that's just something to consider. I'm going through this pretty fast. Thoughts, questions right now? A lot of information, and I'm talking too much at you. The one thing I am going to do right now is really quickly go over some of the standards of service learning, of quality service learning. And this is a way to consider when you want to move from a community service, good and important work, to something that is about outcomes for young people. A couple of things to consider. Meaningful service, something that is the community needs. Let me give you an example. I was working with actually I wasn't working with this sixth grade class. They made blankets, tie blankets, and gave them to a homeless shelter. And the parents, it had been really driven by the parents. The parents wanted their young people to do a service project. So kids all got together and teacher had them tie the blankets. Parents went and delivered the blankets to a homeless shelter, and the homeless shelter went like this. Oh, thanks. The parents were a little, and I understand that but they were offended that here their kids had done this act of service and good and important work, and left kind of a bad taste in their mouth. The next year, the school asked me to come in and have a conversation, and we found out that the kids no one had talked to the shelter to ask, what is it that you need? So we worked with a young person, and the young person called up Simpson Housing, this homeless shelter, and talked to the volunteer coordinator and said, you know, the class before gave you these blankets, and it seemed like it wasn't, you didn't want them or you didn't like them. I can't even remember what he said. And the volunteer coordinator said, we love that young people want to help, but you made them the wrong size. So they didn't fit the men who were sleeping on the mat. So they hadn't asked, what is it that you need? So meaningful service is really, really critical to any kind of service or service learning experience. Linked to curriculum. And if I could change that, it would read linked to learning. That's one of the standards when you're not just doing it for hours. And again, sometimes that's an on-ramp. We were talking about that in the breakout room. Sometimes needing to do it for hours is an on-ramp and introduces and exposes and gets young people to think. But linked to some kind of learning, reflection. We've already talked about reflection, the importance of it before, during, and after, because we know that reflection helps take the learning and the awareness deeper into for the young people. Diversity, and we don't mean racial diversity or gender diversity. What we really are meaning is perspective. Having young people talk to other people who might have different perspectives, because that informs them, and that's also practice in that their thought, their perspective might not be the only one. Another example, worked with another group of those seventh grade boys. They had seen I live in Minnesota, and this was a Minnesota school, and they'd walked around their community or their school, and they saw that there was a lot of salt that was left over on the sidewalks after a snowstorm. And they knew that salt, when it gets into a water system, it goes into the sewer or a lake, it happened just so happened that the creek behind their school was deemed, it had too much salt in it. I don't know what the official term is, but it had too much salt in the creek, and probably because of the salt that is used on sidewalks and roads. So their project idea was to get the custodians to not use salt at all, period, paragraph. So we sat down, and we didn't say, oh, they're not going to do that. We just said, okay, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about their perspective. Custodians came in, and the kids said, we don't want you to use any salt. The custodian said, why do you think we use salt? Well, to get the ice, but the ice out the sidewalks, but it's having an impact on the creek behind our school. And the custodian said, let me tell you a little bit, first of all, about why we do it. Just last week, somebody fell and broke their hip. Some grandmother broke their hip. So that's why we do it. The kids were like, yeah, well, we get that, but it's really a problem. And they said, well, one of the things that we do is that we measure it and we mix it with something that isn't as polluting. And so the kids said, we never really thought about that before. Then they said, one of the what we know from our research is that it's not just schools, it's all the driveways that people put way too much salt on their driveways, and that's also impacting. Have you thought about that? And the students went back and did a little bit more research and figured that maybe that's a strategy that they can have impact. So they created a campaign on reducing the amount of salt that homeowners use on their driveways during the winter when it's icy. So it's not where they had intended to go, but it was a way of using a different perspective to get to maybe a different outcome. Youth voice, we know that when young people are engaged and they make the decisions about some of these steps that they're really involved, it has different outcomes for the young people. And sometimes it doesn't work, admittedly. Sometimes young people, like those 7th grade boys, they oppose that potential legislative change bill in their community, and it didn't work. Actually, 15 years later, it did work. They did pass a legislation, which was kind of a feather in somebody's cap, if we could even find the young people where they are. Partnerships, I'm going to just fly over these last 3. Partnerships is, who in your community can work with you. Progress monitoring, looking at what are some, how is it going along the way, and that duration and intensity. We know the research tells us that when young people are doing something more than just a one-off, a couple hours, we know that the duration has impact on the outcomes. Oh, guys, way too much talking. All right, I'm going to pause here. Questions, thoughts, ideas. What's something that you know or heard today that you hadn't heard before? What's something that sparked your interest, or I hadn't thought of it that way, or that's something I'm going to hold on to, or
I think that the example about the blankets and the service project was really relatable as a fundraiser. I think, in-kind donations are always with the best intent, but not necessarily well informed. And so just that mindset of within this context, continuing to ask questions and provide meaningful experiences, because it stinks when everyone's disappointed at the end and people made effort and it's not a useful or helpful tool or product. So I think that was really, it resonated with me.
Thank you, Jess. Yeah. Well intended. I all of these pitfalls that I talked to you about they're well intended, and it's just trying to kind of peel back the layers of the onion to get to some of those, some awareness of how you can have different impact. I'm going to move forward, and this is a great little video. We're going to move that past all this. We don't have time for it. It's a great little 2-minute video, and then we are going to take a very short break because maybe some of you want to stretch or get a glass of water or something like that. This is a short video of young people talking about their different experiences in service learning. There's 2 school experiences, but one that is not school. All of these are transferable. All of these, something like this could happen at BBBS. I really do believe that some of these experience or like this experience can happen. So when you're listening to this, I want you to think about and be able to share just a word or two afterwards. What stands out to you about what the young people are saying? What stands out to you? All right, here we go.
Last year, people from Rapids Lake came to us and they had like museums where we could learn about Dakota and Native American culture. We decided we could do a pop-up museum so that kids in our school could learn a little more about it. So there is a Look Museum and there is a Shield, and then there is a Tuck Museum.
Something that was very apparent in town was that there is no safe place for people to both learn how to skateboard and to skateboard. So we decided that a logical thing to do would be build a skate park.
We get to go out and like teach these young children about how to help their communities and like prevent the habitats from being destroyed. It's like just really fun to like get these kids outdoors and help them learn more about what they're learning in class.
I learned that some things can take a lot of work.
I've learned that the size of the project doesn't matter. It's how dedicated I am to what I'm doing.
What I learned is to be respectful to other people.
Usually like we'd be in little cliques and like have our own little groups and not really even know about anybody else. It like pushes us to like bond a lot and teamwork.
I think it has helped us to grow our confidence. I just think it's helped build our personalities and maturity as a whole.
I think that it teaches people to be independent.
In like my future, like I can maybe educate one day other kids on reptiles and how like the wetlands are disappearing.
I think it's brought a huge positive wave into the community.
It's helping me learn different things that will help me in the future and help impact me to like want to start my own program like this.
I learned that I can do stuff that I never thought I would be able to.
At NYLC, our vision is that one day all young people will make positive contributions to society as part of their K-12 education and graduate as civically responsible global citizens. It is the passion, creativity, and innovation of young people that will make this world a better place for us all.
Ooh, a little promo at the end, sorry about that, but it is true. What did you notice? What did you notice, or what stuck with you? Or
I thought it was all very positive. They all spoke very clearly, precisely. They were all, very impressed with the skills I think that they've learned throughout those projects. What was it? Bonding, teamwork, independence, all kinds of things that they learned through these projects. It's awesome.
I learned that. Clearly, yes, that was a prompt, I am sure, but they had an answer for it. They did. They were recognizing. Just a lot of the words we shared earlier mentioned in the video. Absolutely. And had ownership. Absolutely. Those boys who had made or had gotten the skate park together Well, we just figured there was no safe space, so we figured we should get a skate park. Anything else?
Maybe too, like them just kind of learning about like a passion for something, or whether it's the environment or, the community, or just kind of having, someone said ownership, but just developing like a passion for something that's outside of, what they normally think about.
Mm-hmm. Sylvia, that's such a good point. I worked with some 7th grade girls who were really passionate about bees. They lived in a suburb, and this suburb didn't allow beehives in their backyards. And I can see both perspectives, right? But they went to their city council because they were advocating. And years later, because they actually worked on it from 8th grade to 9th grade to their 10th grade passion project. And by the time they were 12th graders, they had changed the legislation or the rules and regulations of this community, where there were some spaces where you could have a beehive. And they went on, I mean, it's fueled that passion. It helped me to grow confidence. I think we want that in all the young people that we're working with. It helped me to be independent. Help me to educate others. I just love that little video. It's short, sweet, but also captures some of what we hope a service learning experience will be for young people. So I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. Is 5 minutes enough time, guys? Because I'm flying through some other stuff in the after. I pack way too much in these trainings, and we're going to do another really fun video. We're going to talk a little bit about your why, and then we're going to look at some resources that might be useful in considering how you take next steps. All right, so what's your why? I'm going to ask you first, why do you think service learning, why is it good for young people? What are some of your thoughts about that? And I'll put up the chat so I can read that. But I really would love to hear your thoughts. And just that hour and 15-minute overview, why do you think what's in it for young people?
I think again, it's that skill building opportunity. And again, goes back to just practicing what the skills that they're going to need in the future.
Absolutely. Future ready. I was at a conference the other day and they talked about engage, empower, and future ready. That's also what you're all about. You want young people to be engaged and empowered. So some thoughts, any other thoughts before I flash mine? I really appreciate that it is about skill building. It's not just about the hours. And again, that I don't mean to be have a judgment about that, but the time that we have with our young people is really critical, and not always enough time to get to some of those outcomes, so making it be meaningful. So some of the things, academic and cognitive development, we know that if they are researching an issue, if they have to open a book or talk to other people, they're engaging their brains and their skill, and they're building that kind of skill. Sorry, went too fast there. I think that social, emotional, the personal growth, you were talking about that, Carolina. The personal growth, some of those life skills that they're really practicing, social emotional learning. I think that has been since the pandemic, we've heard such buzz around social emotional learning. And we know that that's really critical, that the young people right now are really suffering because they have not had those opportunities to grow and develop and practice social emotional learning. And I would say that a service learning, quality service learning experience taps into that. That is one way to grow social emotional learning. So if you're looking for reasons, that whole social emotional learning is key. And then the 21st century skills, the communication, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, those are all skills that young people need in order to be successful. They just need those, and it's practice. It's a way to practice. How about for people in your spaces? at your agency. Why service learning for the bigs and the staff?
Gets us out of our routine environments and offers new perspective.
Thank you, Jess.
I think it's also a way to kind of like see things in action and feel a little bit of a spark or confidence building, motivation.
Mm-hmm. In developing your skills as well, right? As that kind of facilitator. Yeah. Some things that I was thinking about is that it really connects to real world experiences so much. And while this might not be a classroom kind of setting, you are doing it with a group of young people. There are lots of service and service learning projects that can be done. I think the power is when you work as a group. So we really like to talk about collective action, but it connects to the real world. It's not just hypothetical. It's not just about the what ifs. It's a real thing. I think that role and purpose. I have heard what you were talking about, Maggie, really resonated with me, because I think sometimes it's a fun. It gives a different perspective for the adults in the spaces, and gives a different some people even say that it helps share the work, because sometimes the young people are doing the work. You're not having to lay everything out. How about for the community? How does this impact the community? Why service learning for the community? Jocelyn, any thoughts on why service learning would be good for a community where Big Brothers Big Sisters is?
Oh, sure, I can comment. Yeah, I think it also helps establish relationships and to see us more on a personal level and making that connection. Instead of just, the office and the name, getting in the community, getting to know who you're working with. And it helps strengthen the relationships, especially if you already have a connection with the organization or the people that you're doing the community or the service learning with in the community.
Absolutely. I think some of my thoughts was real community solutions. Sometimes, and we talked about this before, sometimes young people come up with ideas that we wouldn't have thought about. So real community, real solutions. Sometimes young people bring new energy and perspectives that we need. And we are building a new generation of leaders. Although this slide, I've been doing some work with our youth leadership, our youth advisory council, and one of them said to me, Julie, we're not a generation of leaders for tomorrow. We are leaders right now. And that just really resonated with me. Absolutely. They are leaders right now. So, but we are supporting them, and it allows that youth adult partnership to really support. Everybody has something to bring, and that partnership can be strengthened. And then that last bullet, that one's the one that really that really touches me. It's what we're really changing the image of youth. And maybe I've said this to you before on another call, but we've all heard that, oh, kids these days. And I say it still, kids these days. They just, kids these days. And it goes from that to kids these days. They got ideas, and it's changing the image of our communities to really think about what young people have to bring. I'm going to show you another video because I think this is just a really great snapshot. And then I'm going to be asking you to fill out a little Padlet on your why. Why do you want to use service learning? This video is from Michael Jr. We've all heard Simon Sinek's conversation about what's your why. Well, Michael Jr. talks about when you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking toward it or in your purpose. This just resonates with me. It's not necessarily about youth development, but it has implications. So let's listen to Michael Jr.
How
Can
do
you
I
hear?
know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's, you know, it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, you know, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director? Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now, right now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Okay, here's what I want you to catch. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
So I love what he said. You become more impactful because you're walking toward or in your purpose. Thoughts, comments? What'd you like about that video?
I think it was pretty spot on, right? I mean, very true. When you go back and, like you had said, or somebody said earlier about why you're in nonprofit work. I think Jocelyn mentioned, you know, her why. And I mean, I think that's why all of us are here today, right? We found our passion, or, you know, we have empathy, and, you know, we love doing what we're doing. So.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Other thoughts? Maggie, you look like you're just about ready to turn off your turn on your mic. Any thoughts?
No, I was thinking about the next prompt.
So, all right, we will go to that next prompt. All right, I've been collecting people's whys for a couple of years. I just put a link to a Padlet. Jocelyn, that's cool. Pick up time. So if you would go to that tiny URL, that link, and on the left side, you'll see that there's a column for Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Take a moment and share your why. It is anonymous. You don't have to put your name in. But what's your why for using service learning? I'm going to play a little music here just so it's not dead silent. So I'll give you a couple minutes. See a little plus at the very right underneath BBBS March 2025. Click that plus and then you can type in. And feel free to read some of these others. I think they're really inspirational. You know, a lot of people doing it for different reasons, and some are the same. It is kind of interesting to look at all the different spaces. We've got schools, we've got communities in schools, we've got civic engagement, there's after school leaders, a lot of people coming together to identify how they can support young people to make change. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a good link if you need to justify, and I don't know if I'm not sure that that's where you're at, but sometimes some spaces need to justify the why or why you're doing it. There's some great snippets of information. Okay, I'm going to show you now some resources that we have on our website, but I actually have a link to, I'm going to put that in the chat right now. It's a link to a folder, and I believe that Jocelyn or Bridget sent it to you, where we have some resources. And I want to just quickly go over these because I think this is one of those these resources might be the way to jumpstart an experience with the young people that you're working with, and or the adults that you are supervising and leading through this process. The first group of materials, we call it the Engage series. It is a curriculum. We call it a handbook, and there are 14 weeks of activities. Each week has a opener, a kind of a contents activity, and then a closing activity. It is built around the service learning process. So embedded in each one of these Engage books is that IPARD process. So it is plug and play. One needs to get comfortable with the information in it. I've seen lots of different kinds of spaces use these handbooks. One is for elementary, one is for middle, and one is for high school. It is not topic specific. So it really walks the group through identifying an issue that they want to address. Sometimes that's where people have a hard time launching into, is where do you start? I think it's fine when you're getting, when you're uploading and you're just figuring this out for the first time. I think it's okay to say, we are going to look at the area of hunger, or we are going to look at the area of the environment. I think it's okay to work on a focus area. Or find one of those projects that is part of something that you're already doing, and then just kind of figure out how to backtrack it. Now, I've seen people take these books and input some of the things that they've already done, or use some of this and apply it to another framework or structure. So know that you can pull it apart, tease it apart, and find what works for you. This is an example of what one of the pages, one of the lesson plans looks like. You'll see there's learning objectives on the left side. And then here is an example of an activity really broken down into directions, what materials you need. But what I really want to point out is that the learning objectives for all of these books are connected to social emotional learning objectives. Some of them have 21st century skill building built into it. So it is a way for you to run a 14-week or longer. They're hour-long sessions. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but there may be some spaces where you're gathering some people together, young people together, where this aligns. The next set of resources that we have are books on specific topics, and they are based around the Sustainable Development Goals. We have 8 books. There are 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. We haven't gotten through all of those categories yet, but they're topics that are kind of a focus area. This is geared towards upper middle or high school, and I don't know where those, if your spaces, if you're working with high school as well, but this is, some of you are, absolutely. But there's one on health and well-being, there's one on education equity, there's one on gender equity, there's one on climate action, peace building, responsible production and consumption. There is one that's also designed to be done online. So if you have a virtual group, you can use that. And again, these are topic specific. Again, just another example of what this might look like. Outcomes on the left side, how long it'll take. There's some examples written through this. And then I wanted to draw your attention to our website, nylc.org. You can go to the resource library here and click that on, it'll ask you to create an account, which is totally free. And there are other service learning resources like Getting Started in Service Learning, or a service learning unit plan organizer, just lots of other service learning resources that might help. All right, I've been talking at you for 2 hours, or an hour and 42 minutes. What kind of questions are you thinking about?
I think kind of what you said is just trying to not recreate the wheel and try to incorporate it into something that we already do. And maybe just pull a few people together and have a brainstorming session on what might be the best fit without creating an exorbitant amount of work that goes along with, doing the service learning project. So
Pat, are you thinking about a space or a group, or where are you thinking it might land?
well, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Like I said, I don't really want to recreate the wheel, but we have different group capacities, but some of it we already have curriculum for some of those spaces. So I'm not sure we could incorporate some of this in those spaces or not. That would be something I'd need to kind of discuss with other people,
Absolutely.
to try to see. But like I said earlier, we are creating a form or a list of places where matches can go do volunteer work together. And at one point, we kind of talked about maybe creating a whole, can't think of the right word, but like creating an initiative around it and awarding a prize for the match that did the most volunteer work in the next 6 months, trying to create some interest in doing community work with our matches, because we really don't do enough of that. So I don't know, just thinking.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and it is one more thing, right? I recognize that.
Yeah.
And so finding some of those spaces, and maybe it's coming together with different groups of matches. Maybe, a couple of matches having good big impact. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Jess, where are you thinking, Jess, it might land?
Oh gosh. I mean, I agree with Pat. I think it's like collaborative approach always at our shop. So I think we already have post-activity surveys for the free activities that we provide, bigs and littles, just to make sure that they're informing future activities, and if we should, repeat what they attended. And so I'd be interested to kind of, to Pat's point earlier of exploring service opportunities, but then have it informed by the youth. Maybe starting with a few different examples, or even adding a question on there specific for service learning. Yeah, I don't know.
One of the things that I'm thinking about as well, I've worked with a group called Doing Good Together. It's about encouraging families to work together to raise kids who care and contribute. And one of the things that they promote, and they do, and you can do this in your agencies, is have a family service fair. So I could see you having a big and little service fair where there are different stations, and you move through the stations and you do different service projects. It would be service learning if young people were helping to create it. At these different stations, there is usually a representative from the agency that talks a little bit about the issue that they are addressing. For instance, if they're making dog toys, there might be somebody from the Humane Society that talks about their agency. If they're repacking rice or beans. There might be somebody from the food shelf that would be there to be able to share about the agency. I think that's kind of and what we also have done is put like reflection questions at the stations. So as the big and little, I'm just thinking, this isn't youth voice, but it's kind of a way to start. As the big and little go from station to station to station, there are questions that help them have conversation about it. And there are prompts so the big doesn't have to come up with it. That could be a really, really cool way to do that. So I'm sure you all have done some kind of service projects at, writing letters to men and women who are in the service. Lots of simple little projects that can be done. I call them kitchen table projects because they can be done at a kitchen table. Could be a really fun thing. That's an idea. Maggie, what are you thinking? I'm putting you on the spot, and really you can say, Julie, I pass. You always know you can pass with me. What are you thinking?
No, that's okay. Sylvia and I were just texting on the side. Actually, we really like a lot of Pat's ideas. We have our Youth Advisory Council, which is on their second cycle, but it's all new kids. So it has, it's kind of like going back to the beginning a little bit of getting everyone on board, kind of building that muscle of making sure they're showing up to meetings. So I think we're not quite in a stage of adding on a lot of new responsibilities at this point, but I think like I said, I really like your idea, Pat, of thinking of volunteer opportunities that all of our matches could do. So we were just talking about maybe some of the kids doing research in their different service areas based on what's going on in their community and their interests, and that could be something we could share out with the rest of the agency. Sylvia, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I love that idea. And sorry, I had to come off mute. I'm having some issues. So just y'all didn't need to see that. But I loved doing good together. I love that phrase, Julie, that you shared with us. I think that if it's okay, I'd love to use that. That's cool.
Go to their website, doinggoodtogether.org. Full disclosure, I've been involved with them for a long time, and I'm not asking you to fund. I want you to go there to explore it because they've got book resources, they've got ideas for projects, they've got tons of free resources. So it's a great resource for service projects as well. And what I love, one of the things that they've done is at the service projects, they actually read books to kids on these issues and have discussions about it. I mean, that's where the service learning can kind of be woven into. And if you have children, this is a really fun project, a really fun place. There are some spaces, some cities that have their own volunteer listing that are family-friendly activities, and I can't remember which ones those are, but something to take a look at. It'll give you some ideas of what to do with your families as well. Carolina, any ideas, any thoughts that are coming up? And really, it's okay to say no.
Yeah, I'm really in the brainstorming phase of just collecting all these ideas and assessing how to roll this out.
I will be leaving you with my email. If you want to set up a time to have conversation, please use me. I love the brainstorming space as well. And this needs to kind of resonate. I don't expect you to come out of a 2-hour flash overview going, okay, this is what we're going to do on day 1 and on day 3 and week 4. That's hard. You just need to wrestle. I told you that before, that word that my dad, the farmer, used to use. I'm going to go ahead here because there's some resources, and Mitru has a few words that she's going to share as well. Gotta find my cursor here. I wanted to share with you a couple of different, this is another idea. I hadn't thought about this before, but Youth as Solutions is a national program that NYLC hosts where an adult and a team of young people come and meet regularly with other teams, and they do a service learning experience. I'll drop the link in the chat for you. We also have a National Service Learning Conference. I'm being shamelessly marketing right now. A great opportunity to learn more. See you later, Jess. Learn more. We also have a podcast called The Power of Young People. And what's cool about this podcast, it's young people talking about what they've done. And it's a way to get young people to think about what other young people have done. So it's just a way to stimulate some ideas and some growth. So I'm going to drop all of this into the chat right now. Always takes me a minute here. And I will also send it to Jocelyn and to into Bridget to forward, just in case you can't pick it up from there. Our next meeting is going to be April 15th from 11:30 to 12 Eastern. I think most of you are Eastern. So this is the link that I just put in there. If you want to take a picture of that. And there's also a link. Oh, guys, I always have to do some kind of a survey. So I am going to put the link to the survey in the chat. So I hope that you take a moment and let me know how I did. How can I do this better? I'm always trying to figure how best to meet your needs. And I am also going to put my email, jrbascom@nylc.org. And I'm very serious. Call me if you have some conversation something that's on your mind. And before I hand it over to Mitru, just one word. I want one word from each of you that represents how you're feeling today. Put it in the chat or let me hear your lovely voices. What's one word? And everybody, Bridget and Jocelyn too, if you can, Jocelyn. Carolina, one word.
Hopeful.
Awesome. Cool. Knowledge. Pat, thank you. Yeah.
I'm going to say excited.
Excited. Cool. Maggie, did you need to step away? No, there you are.
No, sorry, I moved my desk to sitting and forgot to turn it back on. I would say curious.
Okay, curious, yeah. Bridget.
My brain is so tired that I didn't know if I spelled inspired right, but I'm inspired.
Oh, there it is. Inspired. All right. Jocelyn, I don't know if you're able to you're probably driving now, so you get a pass. You get a pass because I want you to be safe. Mitru.
Look, I am being safe, and the cop just pulled over somebody for speeding in the school zone, so I'll be quick. I'm feeling excited and inspired. I'm gonna copy Bridget, and just can't wait to see the amazing things that this group does.
Yeah. Very good. Thanks, Jocelyn. Mitru, a word and then dive in.
Okay, well, I have to say thoughtful. I was trying to ideating. I just have so many thoughts right now and so many ideas. And I'm thinking that's how other people are feeling too. So thank you. That's wonderful. It's so wonderful to have all of these great resources, and on the website, I see there's even more resources. So you all are definitely in good hands. And I'm like the backup to the backup. So anytime you need me, Bridget will let me know, or you'll let me know. But I just wanted to tell you that my name is Mitru Charlante. I'm with the Youth Safety and Wellbeing team. My entire career has been focused on children and youth, and I love working directly with young people in service learning, self-advocacy, peer advocacy, activism, education. So this is giving me a lot of ideas and a lot of memories. And I think some of you not sure what you're going to do. It sounds to me that's where you're supposed to be right now, right? Because we don't want you to just investigate alone, investigate in partnership with the young people. And I also think if I were in your seat, I'd be wondering if I have these different ideas, but how am I going to relate that to mental health and well-being? So use this group to have those kind of conversations too. I bet you will be able to connect almost every why to mental health and well-being. And if you have challenges with that, I can help you with that as well. Because when it comes to youth development, service learning, social emotional learning, it's the intentionality of how you set up the experience and the programming for the young people, and connecting that why, right, that will get you to being accountable to the goals around mental health and well-being. So there are a lot of ways to get there. How many of you would say you are in the I part cycle, kind of pre-I or I, investigating? And of course, Julie's resources and format are so aligned with our own outline around this kind of work, because part of what I love so much about service learning is that young people learn all those cycles, like learn by doing, acting, all those cycles of project planning as well, right? So if you think about Julie's I part, but so there's some research involved, and some of that research may be online research, maybe reading materials. That's great, depending on what the issue is that they want to study. But what really makes the project special and suited to your community, like some of the examples that we just had, is really doing that investigation with the group that we're wanting to affect by this project. And sometimes that's the first challenge too, right? Well, we want to help all kids. All right, like just bringing in, not crushing anyone's dreams, but just trying to bring in to like kind of the right size that your youth will be able to reach and engage and affect. So if that's your county, your community, a particular school, a particular park, whatever that is, part of your investigation, Julie talked a bit about this, may include observation, taking photos, interviews, surveys, one-to-one interviews, listening sessions, focus groups. I've been brainstorming all the different ways that the young people might gather information. And if we're talking about things like mental health, youth help seeking, when you have a serious stressful problem, who do you talk to? Who would you talk to, right? That type of survey, or asking about their knowledge of community resources or their confidence in mental health supports. Maybe asking them how safe they feel in certain outdoor play and rec areas, because that contributes to our mental health when we don't have safe places to play. But any of these types of things, if we're asking minors, asking anyone, but we're going to focus on the concerns with minors right now. If we're asking minors to disclose about their own stressors or mental health, we just have to be really careful about how to approach that. And I think we don't have any slides today, so we'll just plant some seeds as you're getting into the beginning of this process. We'll come back with some written guidance. But some of the 5 main areas to keep in mind: consent. And if we get too fancy with your research, you're going to have a fancier process for getting consent. But if it's, youth asking their interviewing their peers, you doing listening sessions of waiting littles, that's okay. Again, if you make it too formal, you'll need more formal consent. But consent that the young person who's participating in your investigation, they understand what you're doing with their answers. They understand, will this be confidential or anonymous? It's really better with youth to youth survey, like if it's written surveys or digital surveys, to make it more anonymous, because it can be really hard for you to manage keeping it confidential, things like that. But they need to know, how is this going to be used and shared? How are you going to keep it confidential? Any safety issues they might have. Again, let's say your own and youth council is saying bullying and exclusion, bullying, that type of stuff is what is affecting their age group's mental health. And if they ask other kids direct questions about that, that may bring up some emotional or physical safety issues for them. So all of that needs to be done with adult guidance and supervision. And with always, anytime we ask about sensitive topics to adults or youth, we make sure they know what kind of resources are available. For with young people, they're big, they're caring adults, but also we'll remind you about the crisis text line that we use that, anyone can chat with the crisis text line and talk to a counselor if anything that is discussed, is upsetting to them, brings up things for them. But also some other tips on doing, surveying and interviewing is not to ask people, not to put them in a position where they're disclosing their own mental illness or mental health challenges. And sometimes, we even do this with our own youth council when we interview them directly about different topics. We don't say, have you ever experienced, has anyone ever needed to talk to a counselor? If you needed to talk to a counselor, would you know where to go? So anything like that's too personal or too sensitive, just consider making it more a general question rather than asking someone to potentially disclose. And then I think, if as you're planning this, that I hit send on my chat here. Yeah, we're here to help if you need help reviewing any of your surveys or tools like that you might use for interviewing or focus groups, listening sessions, town halls. But also there are other ways to get feedback, like using other forms of self-expression, like have young people do artwork or write poetry or things that express their thoughts or their concerns about a particular challenge. So I'm going to leave it there. So I'm not trying to squeeze too much in after the hour here, but I will drop one little teaser for all of us, and happy to share this link with Julie as well. But we have our 5th annual virtual Youth Safety Summit. Youth Safety and Wellbeing Summit is coming up the first week in April. And we're really highlighting youth voice in this summit. And we'll be bringing on a few other national nonprofits like NAMI and Active Minds, Sandy Hook Promise, and they have some materials as well that really focus on youth-led advocacy around the different issues that they work with. So there's potential service learning opportunities in there. And one thing we've been working on is building partnerships at the national level that also have local affiliates. So you have a human being there to partner with, like NAMI, Active Minds, and they're really excited about working with you all. So we'll come to the summit to get the unveiling of that, and then we're happy to provide more information as we go. Is that good for now, Bridget? Anything else?
Thank you. That was perfect, Mitru. And team, we will follow up with written feedback on that guidance for you all in base camp. And also just some food for thought. The Youth Safety and Wellbeing Summit, your attendance and participation in that will also support your deliverables on this Altria grant. So please keep that in mind. It'll be very worth your time. Julie, did you have any final words for the group?
A question about that is the Youth Safety and Wellbeing Summit, is that for adults or adults and youth?
It's most of the sessions are for our affiliates, and we do invite some partners. The opening session this year features young adult speakers, and it's open to bigs and parents. And after we all see the recording, we'll probably recommend using it with littles as well.
Very cool. Thanks. My only comment is, really, if you are wanting to have a conversation, don't hesitate to reach out. I've got I'm really eager. I'm really committed. Most of you know me for a while. You know that this is important work. Love that it is being woven into the theme of mental wellness and safety and well-being. I think especially look at that health and well-being book that might give you some ideas. And thank you again. This is a long chunk of time. This is a long chunk of time. So, these are being patient with me and my computer. The malware attempt.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you, Mitru. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, everyone, for your time today, and we will be following up with you in base camp soon.
Sounds good. So we can add information in base camp for you.
Yes, we will.
Perfect. Great to hear from you all today.
Bye.
Nice to see you,
Take care.
Really great to meet you.
You too.
Okay.
That was long. That was really long, and it felt like they didn't want to do a lot of talking. I think when there's a small group like that, they don't always talk. It was good. It was fine.
Yeah, no, it was good. I noticed they were a bit more quiet, but I think they're all thinking and maybe having side conversations like Maggie had mentioned. So I think their wheels are turning, and we'll
What is
have.
what is their deliverable, Bridget?
So there's a few.
Okay.
One of them is supporting youth mental wellness programming within their agency as it relates to like the very specific topic of youth advocating for mental well-being, mental health. And so
Okay.
that's why we thought the service learning was such a perfect fit for this. So it's still similar to last year where there's youth leadership, but now it's more defined as youth leadership in the form of advocacy, youth voice in the form of speaking out, exploring youth mental health with their peers. So it's a
So
series
that's a touchy one because they can't. It just what Mitru was talking about is you can't collect. You don't want young people to collect data on other young people. The HIPAA rules. So it's
exactly.
interesting.
Yeah, and then also they'll be collaborating or not collaborating, that's the word. It's been such a busy week already. My words are escaping me. Engaging with us on like social emotional learning webinars that we're going to be hosting with youth safety and well-being. So there's a few different touch points where they'll have like plug and play materials to take back to their site-based programs, their group mentoring programs. That's the emphasis this year.
It's a jump to go from these ideas to how you put it into place. So I would be really happy if we need another interim conversation with the whole group, just because I saw blank faces like,
yeah,
go with this, and maybe I'm going to do some thinking about this. Down the road, creating a Big Brothers Big Sisters a curriculum around something like this. Anyway, that's not for here or there, but
yeah,
how can I best support? What do you think? How can I best
So
support?
what just popped in my mind is I feel like what might work really well for this group are some examples of service learning projects related to youth advocacy around mental wellness, like to really get them started. And similar to how they had journey maps on how their youth councils would be, this service learning project could be a kitchen table project, or it could be a group going into, an organization. It could really look different for each agency. And I think maybe what they're trying to think is, how does this work for my agency?
Yeah. Let me give some thought to what I might be able to kind of curate and say, here are some ideas that after the conversation with the idea of mental wellness. This is, and I don't like to start with a project, but sometimes they need to start with
I think they want to have a safety net of like, they don't have to start from scratch. Like there are tried and true things. That's just my take.
And there's different, as it was with the youth voice, there are different spaces. Some people might want to have the big and the little go do service, which is fine. It's not service learning. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just service learning is more in the context of a group. So it's almost like a continuum. So maybe sketching out that kind of continuum. It's not but
or
maybe,
like a guidepost. Like here's your 5 bullets. This is your 5 points on a checklist to think about when planning your service learning project. I think giving them those like boundaries, or not, I don't want to say boundaries, but like a
Guidance.
framework,
Yeah.
guidance. Yeah, I think that's, and something like, I think what was really started more conversation